I am trying to share my screen here.
I'll just stop and you can take it over.
All right.
But I'll be back here in the background. So don't worry, I haven't gone anywhere.
There it is. All right. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to my presentation on milk trucks. My name is Stacy Thomas, and I'm just got a bunch of milk truck photos, and I'm going to talk about them. Most of them are my own photos, so they're definitely going to have a Pacific Northwest feel to it. But I will try and talk about some of the other setups that you might see in the other parts of the country. And so for this opening photo here, I chose this. It's a 1973 Kenworth W900. And my dad took this photo the first year he started hauling milk. And I just always liked this photo. It was a brand new truck when he started hauling. And it's painted red and white because my family hauled for the Carnation Company. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about myself and my background in milk hauling. This photo here with the blue and white Peterbilt is the only photo I have of me ever hauling milk, and you can't even see my face. So this was taken probably around 2005-ish. And a little bit about my background is I rode the milk trucks with my dad growing up. I spent every opportunity I could to be with him. And he rode the milk trucks with his dad as well. My grandpa is the one who started milk hauling back in 1946. So yeah, I went through high school riding the milk trucks on my spare time with my dad, and then graduated, turned 17, and was like, well, I need something to do for 4 years before I can drive interstate at 21. So what's a good 4-year job? So I joined the military. And I enlisted in the Coast Guard, and I really enjoyed it. So I ended up staying more than 4 years. I actually did an entire career in the Coast Guard. Unfortunately, during that time, because of consolidation within the dairy industry here in the Pacific Northwest, my family got out of milk hauling. My dad retired. But after I finished my Coast Guard career, I did use my GI Bill, and I went and got my CDL. So in the bright high-vis jacket there is me at CDL school. So I did eventually become a truck driver myself, but it took a while. It was a long road. So talking about hauling milk, going back to the beginning here is it always had to get from the farm to wherever it was being processed pretty quick because it's a very perishable product. Milk is a wonderful medium to grow bacteria in. Anytime milk is above about 40 degrees, the bacteria levels will double every 30 minutes. And so it was important to keep it cold and get it where it needed to go. So in the earliest days, they used milk cans for hauling milk. I have pictured here a couple of stainless steel milk cans, but originally they were just regular steel, and then they were tinned. And they came in different sizes. The standard kind of milk can and the kind that you see in antique shops these days a lot, or somebody has their mailbox post stuck in one along the road, is the 10-gallon can. That's the can on the left. And when full of milk, those weigh about 120 pounds, so they're pretty heavy. Milk cans also came in other sizes. There's 7-gallon, 5-gallon, 3-gallon, and then even little 1-gallon cream cans. But for a long time, this is how milk was moved in the summertime to try and keep that milk cool. Before we had mechanical refrigeration, they would throw wet blankets over the milk cans, or they'd have insulated blankets that were actually designed to fit and snap around a milk can. On the farms, the farmers would usually, on the more primitive ones, would just put their cans of milk in the water trough, and the cold water would cool the milk. And then, there was later mechanical refrigeration. But in the most primitive methods, it was just cold running water. And then below, I got a picture of a wagon. This is a horse-drawn wagon, and it is hauling milk. It was for the Broadview Dairy Company out of Spokane, and they had a farm south of Spokane a little ways, and they use these big teams to get the milk into town every day, and they processed it there. All right. So this is a picture of one of my grandpa's milk trucks, and he took this in the 50s, and this is for hauling canned milk in 10 and 5 gallon cans. And for those of you who are familiar with North Idaho, the roads have not improved much since then. This is, springtime, mud season. And even later, when my dad was hauling milk, he talked about how he chained up more in the springtime than he did in the wintertime because of all the mud. But my grandpa, he loved the international trucks, so most of his trucks were internationals. And I mentioned those milk cans weighed 120 pounds each, and my grandpa, because all he did was handle milk cans, he could actually take one in each hand and lift both into the back of this truck at the same time. So he was a pretty strong guy. Here's another photo from 1947. So the middle truck there is one of my grandpa's milk trucks. He also hauled fish. Him and his brother actually hauled fish from Seattle into Montana before World War II. That was a big thing they did. And then my grandfather got drafted into World War II. And then when he got out and rejoined the trucking business, they continued to haul fish for a little bit, but pretty much this was close to the end. They transitioned all to milk in the late 40s here. No mechanical refrigeration on these. These are just insulated vans. I do remember my grandpa telling me that he would rig up in the summertime basically a swamp cooler on the front of these where the vents are to try and keep the milk cold. So this is the Broadview Dairy Company here in Spokane. This building still stands, and you see out there all those milk cans stacked up. And milk cans, very labor intensive. They only hold 10 gallons each, and they're heavy, and you took a lot of them to get a decent volume of milk to process. So starting in the late 40s, going into the 50s, it varied in different parts of the country. They started to move away from shipping milk in cans, and they started looking at bulk. So this is a bulk tank. This is actually the bulk tank on my farm. I'm a dairy farmer. And in our area of the Pacific Northwest, everybody made the shift in September of 1956. Everybody agreed on 1 month to do it, and that's when they did it. And a lot of farms chose not to shift over because it was quite the investment in equipment. And so a lot of small farms that were maybe only shipping 1 or 2 cans of milk, or not even milk, they might have been separating the milk on the farm and just selling the cream. They were left without a market, and so they got out. Other farms basically began specializing in dairy, whereas before they might have been a more diversified farm. But September 1956, that was when our area shifted to bulk. And in fact, that bulk tank that I use today was built in 1958. It's a Van Vetter. I'm told the tank itself was actually built by Boeing, but it uses direct expansion cooling plates in the bottom of it to cool the milk. You can see the compressor on the wall behind it. And since bulk tanks have been around, the technology for those really haven't changed at all. So in the lower right-hand side of your screen, though, you'll see a little bulk tank truck, and that was my grandpa's first bulk tanker. I think the truck is international, but the tanker I think was a Butler, and my grandpa named that truck Elvis because it shook so darn bad. But that was the first bulk tanker truck my family had, and it was actually later sold to Washington State University for their dairy and their creamery down in Pullman, Washington. And they used it for a number of years up until about 10 years ago. I think they finally sold it at an auction, but they used it for a long time. But that was my family's first bulk tanker truck. And bulk tanker trucks, they're not refrigerated, they're just insulated. This one, it was actually insulated with cork. But you get cold milk in there from the farms. They're so well insulated that it would stay cold for a long, long time. Usually up for a couple days, it would stay below 40 degrees. And so now we advance a few years. So unfortunately, I don't have a lot of photos from between that first truck and then here in the late 70s. This is a photo from my dad. So that truck in the very beginning, that red and white Kenworth, this is the same Kenworth here. It's been repainted blue and white, and it is a 73. You can see the gold emblem on the hood there. And then they also had a 74 Kenworth K100 beside it there. And then these were truck and trailer. So, straight trucks. And then you can see they each had a trailer that they pulled. And, my family hauled all over the inland Northwest here. And you can just see the edge of a red truck there. That was actually a Carnation truck. And I remember them using this truck into the 90s, and it's actually a 1949 International. Had a little tank on it, and they used it for hauling cream from the plant in Spokane to other creameries in Spokane. But they used that tanker for a long time. Here's another view of that same 74 Kenworth K100. I have a lot of miles in the passenger seat of this truck growing up. It's a straight truck. My uncle actually later converted it to a semi-tractor, and I believe he entered it in a truck show here in Spokane. I don't know if it was the ATHS show that was in Spokane or if it was just another one, but I remember he did enter it at one time into a truck show. But yeah, he later converted this into a semi-tractor. And a funny story about that was when I was little, riding on the truck with my dad. We were down in the Yakima Valley in a Peterbilt conventional, and it was me and my little brother and my dad. And the tractor broke down, and it was about 110 degrees out. And so, this was before anyone had cell phones, so we had to hitchhike back to a rest area to use a payphone, and got my uncle on the line. And this was the spare tractor at that time for the company. So he had his son with him. And so they started coming down towards where we were broke down. It's about a 3-hour drive. And this was it. This was in probably the mid 90s. And this, of course, on the way down, the scale house was open, and he got pulled in for inspection. And he had to educate the state patrolman there about why this 1974 did not have front brakes and didn't need to have front brakes. But eventually he did make it down to us, got coupled on to our trailers that were left along the highway because the broke down tractor had already been towed away. And then on the way back to Spokane for 3 hours in this little day cab Kenworth was my dad, my uncle, and 3 kids all packed in there. So it was a tight fit, but I still remember that like it was yesterday. So these straight trucks, this is actually a photo of a truck I took in a friend's dairy in Wisconsin, but they have these cabinets in the back. And because you got to get the milk from the tank on the farm into the truck. And so there's different pumps. This is a Jabsco pump that this particular truck has. But, there's a cabinet in the back to keep everything clean and sanitary. The green chest there is actually an ice chest. Every farm has samples taken of the raw milk before it's pumped into the truck. And so that keeps the samples cold. And then you can see there's an electrical extension cord to run the pump. So some pumps are electrical. Some will run off hydraulics powered off the truck. And some trucks or with tractors that have pump boxes mounted on the tractors, will actually have a PTO directly off the transmission to run the pump. So there's different ways to run the pumps, but this particular one's electrical, and a majority of them are electrical, but you do see hydraulic and PTO pumps as well. So from truck and trailer, we started talking about hauling milk in tandem, and this is a photo of the 1983 edition of Milk and Liquid Food Transporter. And this is actually one of my family's trucks on the cover, and the article is about transporting milk in tandem. So this photo here was taken by my mom, actually, and it's my dad driving, and it's near Spokane where we're at. And yeah, it's a cover photo. It's a 1982 Kenworth K100 there, had a sleeper. And it might be hard to see, but there's actually a pump box on the tractor. It's right in front of the quarter fender there on the driver's side. But the pump would be in there, and then there's a valve in the front of the trailer, and there'd be a hose connecting the two. So here's another set of tandems here at a dairy here in Washington State. And this one, so in the previous photo, you had the pump box on the tractor, but the rear trailer also had a pump box. In this trailer here, or in this setup here, the pump box is on the tractor, and then there's actually a valve manifold. So you can actually direct milk into the front trailer, or you can direct milk into a pipe, which runs to the back of the front trailer, and then through a hose along the dolly into the rear trailer.
Hey, Stacy, we have a question.
Sure.
Can you explain how you used a pup trailer for farm pickup, and were you able to back a pup up?
Oh, so for the truck and trailer?
I believe so.
So in the when my dad first started hauling milk in the 70s, a lot of the farmyards could not accommodate a truck and trailer. And so in many cases, it was very time consuming. He'd come up to an area where there's a lot of dairy farms, and then he'd leave his rear trailer someplace. Like in the little town I'm at, which is an hour north of Spokane, there's actually a gas station. And behind the gas station, there's still the pole with the electrical plug-in for the pump. So he'd drop his back trailer next to that pole, go around, fill up the truck, go back to the trailer, pump over to the trailer, and then go back, pick up the rest of the farms, filling up the truck again. And then when he was all full, he'd couple back to the trailer and go to Spokane. Farms eventually put in a lot of circular driveways, and so you could just pull up the back trailer to the milk house, and so it made it pretty easy. But my dad was actually really good at backing up a truck and trailer. And in fact, in this picture here, this is the Carnation Company in Spokane. The receiving bay for the tankers was originally designed for those small can trucks like my grandpa had. And so you'd have to disconnect and back in the truck and the front trailer, or the rear trailer separately. So this is a perfect example of that 90-degree alley dock I had to practice so much when I was getting my CDL. But he could back a rear trailer of a truck and trailer into the receiving bay here. Later with doubles are harder to back up. They actually had a yard tractor with a pintle hook on the front and airline connections on the front, and so they could just put in the rear trailers with that tractor. But I hope that answered the question. It was a very time-consuming pain before you had all these circular driveways, but they could back up the rear pup. So this photo here is the Carnation Company in Spokane, but it originally was the Broadview Dairy. So if you remember that black and white photo of all those milk cans stacked up and beside it, that's this building. It had been added onto, and so actually in the far part of this picture behind the tanker attached to the Kenworth, that's the original Broadview Dairy building. All those milk cans were stacked basically right by that electric pole right behind that tanker. and they eventually added on over the years. But I just always liked this shot. It's a couple of my family's milk trucks got that Peterbilt, and it has a Kenworth W900. That Peterbilt there, that's the one that was in the very beginning that is the only photo of me driving. But this truck is actually still earning a living in Spokane. So I'm very happy to see that it's still earning a living and still blue and white. Just another photo of picking up milk on a farm. This is down in Northeast Oregon. And this route here left Spokane in the afternoon. And like I said, I love riding on the milk truck with my dad. He usually picked me up at school as he was heading to work. And then I'd jump in the milk truck and usually do my homework in the sleeper as he was heading down. So, but my family, so my grandpa really liked the international trucks. Later when they got bigger, my dad, and he really liked PACCAR. So, pretty much mostly Kenworths and Peterbilts for this family here. So there are.
We have a couple more questions that follow up on those.
Awesome.
How did the rear trailer handle during the liquid surges, during stopping, turns, acceleration, et cetera?
You feel it because milk tankers don't have any baffles, and for sanitary reasons. And so you feel, especially if you're going to stop fast, you feel it. And my uncle who drove milk truck, he was kind of an honorary fellow, and he knew how to hit the brakes just right before he was pulling onto a scale. And I mean, those numbers would be all over the place. And, the state trooper didn't want to hold up traffic for a half hour waiting for that milk to settle. So they usually let them cruise by. But you definitely feel it if you go to stop, and, even with your foot on the brake, you can feel that truck surging back and forth as that milk hits those bulkheads. But that's how milk tankers handle.
All right, and we got a couple of people asking, how many gallons were the tanks or the trailers?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So that little tiny milk tanker that was my family's first tanker, that black and white one, was probably about a 1,500 gallon tanker. And so, I mean, you think about how many milk cans, that one tanker replaced. That's a huge labor saver. But like in the picture here, this tanker here, I think the front tanker is about 4,500 gallons and the rear tank is 3,800 gallons. We had some setups that had 4,700 gallon fronts and 4,000 gallon rear trailers. Here in Washington, you can get legal to 105,500 pounds. That's usually what the most milk trucks gross here. Some of the straight trucks that you see in the Midwest that don't pull a trailer at all, they're just a straight truck, but they'll have like 5 axles. Those run anywhere from 5,500 gallon, 6,000 gallon tankers. And so, I mean, there's a pretty good range, but the doubles that you see out here in the Pacific Northwest a lot, usually between 4,000 and 5,000 gallons on the front, around 4,000 to 4,500 on the back max.
Great, thank you.
No problem. So in the Pacific Northwest, especially, most milk trucks are tandems, but we still do have some truck and trailer. So this is a photo I took of a milk hauler that comes up my way. So some of you might be familiar with Linden Transport. They have a milk hauling division called Milky Way. And they use truck and trailer up here in the winter because of the snow and the mud. Having that milk over those drives gives you a lot better traction. And a lot of farms, we talk about the milk moving in the tanker. A lot of farms, you usually got to go up a little hill to get into the farm. So, you pull into a driveway with a semi truck and you have, just a partial load. As soon as you start going up the hill, all that milk flows to the back of the tanker leaving nothing over your drive tires, and then you lose traction. Whereas the truck and trailer here keeps good traction, especially in the ice and the snow and the mud. And so they have a pump box mounted on the side of their truck, and they made their, I call it a pump box, but they made theirs round because you coil up the hose inside and it's round. And then um, above it, you can see there's a box to keep the dust out, keep everything sanitary for the manifold. And they can direct milk into the truck mount tank there, or they have a pipeline that runs through the tank and out the back, and you can see there's a hose going to their rear trailer, so they can fill up their rear trailer as well. I think this truck mount tank, I think it's about a 4,000 gallon truck mount, and then probably about a 5,000 gallon rear tank is what they're running up here. Most of Milky Way's trucks are doubles, but they do have a few truck and trailers just for this northeast corner of the state where I'm at. So you see a lot of milk transported in tubes as well. Not so much here in the Northwest, but in other places such as the Midwest and Northeast. This is actually taken in the Northwest. It's an oddity. That's why I took a photo of it. It has a pump box on the belly of the tanker, not the rear, but you can see both setups. And again, these can run anywhere from 6,000 to 7,000 gallons, 2 to 3 axles, sometimes more, depending on where you're at. But the drawback to these tubes is the space needed to get them turned around, especially in some of these smaller farmyards. Even the doubles, I mean, they trail pretty well, so you could actually get into some pretty tight places. And that's one of the reasons my dad liked the Kenworth cab overs too. Is, I mean, you could get into some really tight places with those cab overs. I'm running out of pictures, but my presentation would not be complete if I didn't talk about my truck 12. And so this is my truck, and I'm going to tell the story about it. It's a 1971 Kenworth K100. It's got a Cummins V903, which I love. I know there's no such thing as a fence sitter when it comes to a 903. People have either love them or hate them. I love them. I used them in the military. I mean, Cummins has been making this engine for over 50 years now, and I always had good luck with it in the military. This truck came with it straight from the factory in 1971. It's the original engine. This truck was actually ordered new by Bruce Motor Freight out of Iowa. They bought it as a set of 5 identical tractors. And sometime in the early 70s, it made its way out to a milk hauler in Sunnyside, Washington, Cliff Vining. And so he had it. And in 1979, my family bought him out, and they acquired this tractor as part of that buyout. And so they ran it for a few years. And I think it eventually became relegated to a backup tractor. It hauled a lot of condensed milk from Sunnyside, Washington to Portland, Oregon, though. In 1986, my dad bought it from the company, so it became his personal truck. And he used it for some odd jobs. And then in the early 90s, he sold it. But I remember this tractor growing up. Fast forward to 2015, and I'm stationed in Alaska with my wife, and I'm watching a documentary on the eruption of Mount St. Helens on television. And this black and white photo in the lower right comes up, and I look at my wife, and I'm like, that's 12. And she's like, what? And I'm like, that's 12. That's a truck my dad used to have. And for those not familiar with the Mount St. Helens eruption in 1980, May 18th, that's not snow in that photo. That's ash. And, the milk still had to get picked up. But I called my dad, my uncle. My dad was still alive at the time, and they were both pretty excited that, I saw this in this documentary. And my uncle was like, I know where that truck's at. And so the next time I was down here in the lower 48 back home, I went and checked it out, and it was parked. And the guy said it's been parked for a couple of years, but it ran when it parked. And I ended up buying it back. very sentimental reasons. Just wanted it. And come to find out, it's been sitting about 10 years, but all it took was new batteries, fired right up. So I've slowly been working on this truck, not quite doing as much as I wanted, time and money and everything, but I am restoring this truck, and I'm very proud to have it. And I think that just about concludes my presentation on milk trucks.
Well, that's
And
awesome.
that's my cat. That's Daisy. That's my cat Daisy. She's one of 11.
That's awesome. All right, we do have a few questions here. Do milk haulers usually run heavy?
They're always legal.
I like that.
So
go ahead.
a lot of work goes in when you're speccing a tanker, because a tanker has a given capacity. We know how much milk weighs. It's 8.6 pounds per gallon. We know what the capacities are. So a lot of work goes into speccing milk tankers and being within, the laws for wherever you're operating. And so, I mean, there's definitely been ways that, things have been, what's the word I'm looking for? Just adapted over the years. So like, for example, early milk tankers had ladders on both sides. Many tankers today only have ladder on one side because it's lighter. You get rid of one ladder. When super singles came out, that was, milk tankers were early adopters of super singles, especially here in the Northwest, because less weight. Anything you could do to get less weight on the truck so you could haul more milk.
All right. So with the Linden truck trailer, what is the usual tongue length between each unit?
Oh, like the length of the dollies?
Yes.
I'm not sure exactly. I think we were running about, between our front and rear trailers, probably like 10 to 12 feet. I know we had a few that were adjustable, but I don't remember the exact measurements.
Okay. Did the transfer hose between doubles ever freeze in winter?
Yes, it does. So, winter times definitely have their challenges. Back in the days when you just had truck and trailer and you had those cabinets in the back of the tankers, you could usually put a couple jugs of hot water in between stops to keep those from freezing up, because in the winter it's not just the hose between the tankers, but your pump would freeze. Your hose coiled up in the pump box would freeze. And so a lot of times you could just throw a couple jugs of hot water in there just to kind of keep it above freezing till you got to your next stop. And dairy farms have extremely hot water. It's part of the law. So like your household water heater, I think, can go up to like 160. Most dairy farm milk houses, their water heaters are like 180 minimum. At one point, my dad was actually asked if he would manage a milk hauling operation in Alaska, which he turned down. But their hoses between their trailers, they actually had insulated blankets that they would snap on those in the winter time. But for the most part, your time between stops, it wouldn't freeze too bad. And then, if you did anticipate a lot of freezing temperature, you would drain everything after you loaded until you could get to your next stop. And then, again, it was time consuming. You'd have to drain between stops, but it was winter is always a challenge in many different ways. Winter makes everything twice as hard as it should be.
Well, that kind of brings us to our next one. How often does the tanker need to be steamed out or sanitized?
So dairy laws vary a little bit from state to state. There's a federal, I call it a guideline called the PMO, Pasteurized Milk Ordinance, that states adopt or choose not to. But in general, the tankers, if they have milk in them, have to be sanitized at least once a day. Many times you can go out and you can pick up multiple loads, especially if you have lots of dairy farms close to the processor, and be able to unload at the plant and go out and get more milk right away, but you still have to wash once a day, wash and sanitize. And then if a tanker's been sitting empty for a while and you go to pick up milk, it has to be sanitized within the previous 3 days to be able to pick up milk. And again, that can vary a little bit state to state. And then while we're talking about washing out tankers, there's a couple different methods. So milk has some interesting properties because you have fat in it, the cream, but you also have a lot of minerals like calcium, which is good for you. So generally, milk tankers are washed out with an alkaline cleaner that is really good at dissolving the fats in the milk. But periodically, once or twice a week, they actually substitute an acid wash on the inside to dissolve what they call milkstone, which is just the mineral buildup from calcium and other minerals in the milk.
Well, that kind of brings us to another question. So can you share how milk would turn to butter in the pumps?
I've never really seen milk turn to butter in pumps. Once in a while on a farm, because the bulk tank does have an agitator in it, if they don't get their milk cool enough, fast enough, their agitator can actually churn out some butter in the tank. And so you open the lid on top and you have little butter balls, basically, for lack of a better word, because for cream to be churned into butter, it's extremely difficult to do that at any temperature other than when it's warm. So it does it best at about 101 degrees, which is the temperature that the milk comes out of the cow as. But even in commercial creameries and such, when they go to churn butter, they'll at least warm it up to 60 or 70 degrees to be able to churn it, because otherwise the fat globules are just too hard when it's cold, and it just won't churn into butter.
So how long of a distance can milk be transported?
I guess it can be transported as far as you can go as long as it stays cold. So I mean, I know that in the hot summer days here in the inland Northwest, where it's 90, 100 degrees, there was time where the plant didn't need the milk at the time, and it would sit in a tanker all weekend until Monday morning, and it would stay cold that whole time. So really, I mean, they're really well insulated, and especially if they're full, you have a lot of thermal mass, and so it will stay cold for quite a while in the tanker.
Awesome. Ken wants to know, what are the orange lines under the hood? I guess on one of those pictures.
Which picture? Oh, on these orange lines?
Yes.
Those are hydraulic lines for the cab jack system. I did my hydraulics in orange when I rebuilt it because in the military all of our hydraulics were orange, and that's all I know.
Awesome. All right. So for Stacy, Steven Sproul just wanted to let you know, if you send him your VIN and email address for your K100, he can get you a copy of the build paper for your truck.
So actually, I have the complete build paper for the truck already, which is
awesome.
Extremely useful. And I actually also have all the original Cummins paperwork for the engine as well. So I'm very blessed.
Well, thank you, Stephen, for your offer, and
yes,
having all of the information. All right. Yeah.
Now I just got to get the parts guys at some of the Kenworths to actually understand what they're looking at when they see a 6-digit VIN.
All right, there you go, Stephen. There's your task. All right. Yeah. So that seems to be all of the questions. We have some. If you want to look in the chat box, you've got some nice comments for you. Thank you, Zach, for offering to show pictures. Unfortunately, we can't really do that in this venue. Oh, and one last question from Tim. He has had the most questions tonight. He's been prolific and awesome. About when was the changeover from from a worker getting inside the tank to scrub it when they started using automatic washers.
Okay, so CIP, that's what we call it, CIP, clean in place. And that varied throughout. And there's still a lot of milk tankers, and there's still a lot of areas of the country where the tankers don't have CIP, which is basically an internal line, and they have spray balls. So you can just hook up a hose to the tanker and wash. But even for a long time, from probably near the very beginning, they would have these, I call it like a probe that would basically drop in from the manhole on top, and it had its own circular cover that you could clamp down, and you'd hook a hose to that, and it had spray balls at the end of that probe, and you could wash the tanker that way. Getting inside and scrubbing a tanker is not unheard of. My family, in addition to hauling milk, would haul grape juice and wine and other food grade liquid products. And some of that grape juice could be pretty sticky, and you'd have to get in there and you have to scrub it out by hand, at least to get the big stuff out. And then you could follow up with the CIP, the clean in place system.
Awesome. Well, it was a wonderful presentation. We thank you, Stacy. It's been great. I've learned a lot, and we look forward to our next one. So everyone, be on the lookout for our next webinar. It will be coming up shortly. We have a whole group on it now, and they are going to be wonderful. And Dave Himmelwright wants to know, Stacy, if your next one can be on DivCos.
Well, I love DivCos, and I don't have one. I'd love to have one someday. I don't know a lot about them, but I do think they're pretty awesome. And I'm hoping maybe somebody else would do one on DivCos, because they're actually a pretty amazing truck. And for those of you out there who don't know what a DivCo is, it's the Detroit Industrial Vehicle Company. And those were the milk delivery trucks that they used a lot for home delivery. So they had kind of that blunt snout looking front. You see them in movies a lot nowadays, but and you could drive them standing up. And so they're a very interesting truck, and there's still a few out there. And I'd love if somebody did one on DivCos.
Well, if you know someone, or you are someone who knows about DivCos, we are always looking for new material for webinars. So if you think you have something, let me know. Events@aths.org. That's event with an S at aths.org. And we'd love to hear from you. With that being said, we will see you all next time, and we will have this recording up on our website shortly. Give us a couple of days. We'll get it up there, and anybody who wants to watch it or rewatch it, or you can suggest it to a friend, we would love to have that. So thank you all, and good night.
Yes, thank you everybody for attending, and thank you, Leanne, for facilitating this. I appreciate it, all the technical assistance.
Absolutely.
And, yes, everybody have a good night.
All right. Bye.